Meet Lucasz Sebastian Gottwald, otherwise known as Dr. Luke, one of the most powerful producers in the music industry. He gave you the soundtracks to your teenage years. Songs like TikTok, Since You've Been Gone, and Say So were created under his guidance. Back then, if you wanted a hit song, you called him. His sound literally defined an entire era, but behind the top records and the platinum plaques lay serious allegations of abuse, manipulation, and SA from one of his very own artists, Kesha, which we will be covering in detail today. These are the Dr. Luke files, and this is Evil. Like always, these are all just allegations from the public unless specifically stated otherwise. I'm just putting everything in one place for your benefit. None of the claims presented later in this video are proof of guilt or a crime. It's just what the court documents are saying. Like, subscribe. Let's get started. Dr. Luke was born September 26, 1973 in Providence, Rhode Island to a loving Jewish family. His father, Janice, worked as an architect and his mom, Laura, an interior designer. Lucas's father was an immigrant from Poland, a World War II refugee whose family survived the Soviet Red Army and thereafter even the Nazi regime. On his mother's side, his grandparents were award-winning directors of marketing and creative art, with his grandmother even being one of the first female art directors of the 1930s in New York. And as he grew up in a New York City loft that used to be a sewing factory on West 30th Street in Manhattan, it would be very obvious what he would aspire to do when he was older, even if he himself didn't know it yet at the time. On Saturdays, his father would take him down to the checkerboard stone tables in Washington Square Park, and at the age of just 9 years old, he would challenge adult players to rounds of speed chess, even playing for money and winning. Around 12 years old, he aspired to be a drummer, but since his parents didn't want such a loud, large, and obnoxious instrument in their house, his older sister lent him her guitar and he practiced with it 6 hours a day. That's not 6, that's like 10 hours, but 6 hours a day. Through these efforts, he would be enrolled into a camp called the National Guitar Summer Workshop when he was 14. Making friends and connections along the way. These connections would grant him lots of opportunities and power when he was older. Maybe a little too much power given the allegations, but we'll get into that soon. One of these connections would teach him how to grow a certain plant many people in America like to sell and use for fun, social settings. And so he began growing this plant in his closet, and he would then begin selling this plant for extra cash, even at one point to his own mother. Go figure. When he was 17, he'd finally quit after one of his music teachers urged him to really focus on his talents, since he was basically becoming a fuck up for like no reason at all. After enrolling in the Manhattan School of Music and getting a weekly gig playing at Augie's Jazz Bar on 106 and Broadway, things were looking very confident for Lucasz. In fact, he even began writing commercial jingles around this time.
One of these
would notably land in a Nike ad that ran back in 1994, earning Lucasz a pretty nice paycheck. In 1997, one of his previous plant sellers would get him a chance to audition for a position on Saturday Night Live. The opening was for lead guitarist on the live band. While working for SNL, he began learning to produce beats and really dip his toes into producing music. He'd also meet a DJ named Liquid Todd and get employed as a DJ himself as a side job. Through one of these gigs as a DJ, he would meet Max Martin, a superpower in the music industry. And through this connection, he'd managed to get into a studio with Max and Kelly Clarkson. Together, they'd write a song called Since You've Been Gone, which of course went platinum in multiple countries. Now I know that was a lot to take in, and usually I don't dive as deep into someone's background this much unless it's a documentary or something, but Dr. Luke is a very special exception because now you can see what kind of force is behind him. He has friends all over, and through his successes, he's made much more. With 36 #1 singles under his belt, he has the music industry in the palms of his hands. And now, for the allegations. Please remember that these are all allegations and not factual evidence. And since this all stems from the decade-long case of Kesha versus Dr. Luke, we will now set the scene. They say the music industry can make dreams come true, but for one young woman, that dream became a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Kesha Rose Sebert was born in Nashville, Tennessee, a bright, fiercely intelligent teenager. Kesha wasn't just chasing stardom, she was thriving. With near-perfect SAT scores, she was enrolled in the International Bachelorette program, auditing university classes in her spare time. A scholarship-bound overachiever with a dream, to make music that meant something. She wasn't a cliché high school dropout chasing a pipe dream. This girl had options, a future, and a family that supported her every step of the way. But then came Dr. Luke. But actually, in reality, it was Max Martin that encouraged Kesha to leave home. The lawsuit says Luke, but other sources say Martin. I quit high school at 17 and got my GED, which was kinda stupid, but I've been working ever since and I'm 23, so for 6 years. So that's not quickly. It's almost like a fourth of my life. She would say this after her first hit record, TikTok, put her name on the map. But more on that later. Regardless, the lawsuit says Dr. Luke saw something in Kesha. She had raw talent and the potential to be the next big thing. So he made her an offer she couldn't refuse. All she had to do was leave Nashville and trust him. And so, she did. When she left home, she signed with Dr. Luke's production company. But the moment she landed in LA, things changed. The promises of mentorship and guidance vanished. Dr. Luke was simply too busy with his high-profile acts, and Kesha's dream started to stall before it even began. Almost immediately, Dr. Luke began to show his true face. He told Kesha about how he'd take girls out on first dates, get them blackout drunk, and then assault them. He'd laugh about it, practically bragging about getting away with it. He told Kesha stories about forcing his pregnant wife to get an abortion, and when she refused, he cut his wife off emotionally, threatening to leave her. All this while he was out partying, cheating, and hooking up with other women. Court documents claim this was his strategy: desensitize, demean, isolate. Dr. Luke completely embodied everything wrong with toxic masculinity. And like many other people I cover on this channel, these allegations just get much worse. According to court documents, Dr. Luke wasn't just grooming Kesha into being used to this kind of behavior. He was isolating her as well. Alone in LA, far from anyone she trusted, Kesha found herself completely at his mercy. He pressured her into drinking, even forcibly administering drugs and alcohol to Kesha. Not offering, not suggesting, forcing. He used intoxication as a tool to break her down mentally, physically take advantage of her, and make her dependent on him. He coerced her into a one-sided contract with his music publishing company, Prescription Songs, LLC, to exclusively control her services as a songwriter. And anytime she stepped out of line, he threatened to take away publishing rights to her own songs. A notable memory, according to Kesha, was the flight where he made her snort something before takeoff. Once on the plane, while she was out, he began groping her. She was so intoxicated that she vomited on herself mid-flight, embarrassing herself in front of rows of people. Another time, he gave her what he called sober pills after a night of drinking. She blacked out, woke up naked in his bed, bruised, sick, and sore, with no memory of what had happened the night before. Kesha called her mom in a panic and told her everything she could remember. That she was naked in his hotel room. That she thinks she's been... and she didn't know where her clothes were. They both agreed that she needed to go to the ER immediately. And later, she learned that those sober pills were actually more commonly known as the date drug. You see, Dr. Luke wasn't just called Dr. Luke for no reason. There was a running joke that he was the doctor because of how many drugs he could prescribe to people for a price.
But back to the incident.
When she confronted Dr. Luke about it, he didn't deny it. He told her that if she ever said a word about what he had done, he'd take away her music rights, her career, her money. And even worse, he'd come for her family, her mother, her brother, and even her dog. And since Luke had access to everything through their contract, he actually had the power to do it. Over the next 10 years, Kesha would endure a campaign of psychological warfare designed to make her feel worthless. Luke would call her a fat fucking refrigerator and humiliate her in front of others. Mock her looks, her voice, her intelligence. He'd say, "You're not that pretty. You're not that talented. You're lucky to have me." He controlled her music, every lyric, every note, every release. He'd promised to renegotiate her contract, especially after her debut album went platinum, but he'd always find an excuse to back out. And always, he'd blame her. He made her believe it was actually all her fault. She deserved this abuse, because let's face it, she would be nothing without him. which is really fucked up, but I'm sure none of you are surprised to hear this since it was so common to see in the past. If they didn't agree to do whatever the label wanted, they'd get shelved. If they didn't sell enough copies, they'd get shelved. But even Kesha, who was a platinum selling artist at this point, was treated like garbage. Dr. Luke's alleged abuse of Kesha was so bad that she developed bulimia. He'd constantly criticize her weight and force her to starve herself to maintain her image. And I know I mentioned that he threatened to go after her family, but I didn't fully explain how. They'd get shelved. Try it again. You see, Kesha's mother is actually a professional singer and songwriter herself. She's written for Dolly Parton, Joe Son, Pitbull, and of course her daughter as well. So Dr. Luke would threaten to take her mom, her songwriting partner, off of her tracks. And at any time Kesha even thought of fighting back, he'd remind her that he owned her, that she had no say in her art, no control over her body, her voice, her image, because of her contracts. And when her family tried to help her, he went after them too. He stole money from her brother's reality TV show and then threatened to shut it down if they didn't pay him off. He inserted himself into literally every corner of her life until she couldn't breathe without him watching. At one point during a meeting at a Malibu mansion, Dr. Luke exploded, literally in the middle of the room. Bad time for jokes. Okay. He had backed Kesha into a corner, thrashed his arms around and screamed, while she curled into a ball on the floor sobbing. And then she started to run away, barefoot down the Pacific Coast Highway. And because she was barefoot, she cut up her feet on the rocks and glass left on the street. She ran all the way up to the mountains just so that she could hide from Dr. Luke. Yeah. It's tough to listen to. He told her that Strike 1 was hiring a manager he didn't approve of. Strike 2 was trying to delay her second album until he kept his promise to renegotiate her contract. And Strike 3, she was utterly terrified of getting to Strike 3.
Basically, they were going to sit on my record unless I did what they wanted. And I was so frustrated because I literally said, anyone in the world but this one person. I will work with anyone you want to put in my path. Like, I love people. I think that's apparent. Like, I think I'm a nice person. That's apparent. But like, it was just this one thing, and I asked not to work with Dr. Luke just because I had not a good experience with him.
Sure.
And it was a one thing, and they just wouldn't even give it to me.
In January 2014, she entered rehab for bulimia nervosa, a disorder triggered and worsened by Dr. Luke's obsession with her being thin. Doctors said her blood pressure and sodium levels were so dangerous, they mimicked those found in stroke victims. She had PTSD, depression, and panic attacks. They told her that being around Dr. Luke was life-threatening. She left rehab in March 2014, but even then she was still under his control, legally bound to keep working with him. He used corporations, Prescription Songs, Cash Money, Kemosabe Records as weapons to keep her locked in. These companies didn't just fail to stop him, they helped hide the abuse, enabled it. Hell, they even allegedly benefited from it. Yes, allegedly. This is all from her initial court proceedings from October 2014, from the point of view of Kesha and her legal team. And as I said once before, some of the facts aren't actual factuals. Like the fact Max Martin was the one who actually convinced her to drop out and go to LA when she was 17. So as we go over the spark notes for this decade-long lawsuit, I'm going to present the facts plainly, not favoring either side. It's up to you to decide how to feel about it. Like, subscribe, here we go. As we mentioned before, on October 14th, 2014, Kesha filed the aforementioned lawsuit against Dr. Luke. But on the same day, Dr. Luke filed a countersuit against Kesha in New York Supreme Court, accusing her of defamation and breach of contract. He denied all allegations and claimed Kesha and her mother fabricated the abuse claims to force him to release her from her contract. He said the lawsuits are part of a campaign to smear his name and extort a better recording deal. Then in December 2014 to early 2015, the legal battle split between California and New York. This is significant because California is where Kesha filed her abuse claims, and Dr. Luke filed his defamation lawsuit in New York. He and his team argued that her abuse lawsuit should be dismissed because there's a clause in Kesha's contract mandating that all disputes be resolved in New York. The Los Angeles Superior Court dismissed Kesha's case in California. Kesha's claims were then transferred and absorbed into the New York proceedings. Kesha amended her New York lawsuit to include Sony Music Entertainment as a defendant, accusing the label of enabling Dr. Luke's abuse and failing to take action to protect her. She claimed Sony turned a blind eye and continued to promote and profit from Dr. Luke despite knowing these allegations. Dr. Luke filed a motion to dismiss the claims against him and Sony, again denying all allegations and maintaining that the claims are false, retaliatory, and designed to pressure him into releasing Kesha from her contract. As a response, Kesha requested a preliminary injunction that would allow her to record music outside of her contract with Dr. Luke and Kemosabe Records. She argued that continuing to work with him would be emotionally devastating and would stall her career, which it did, but New York Supreme Court Justice Shirley Kornreich denied the injunction, stating that Kesha failed to provide sufficient evidence of irreparable harm and that her claims were too speculative. And of course, everyone lost their minds when this ruling happened, quite literally pissing the entire internet off and sparking waves of public backlash. Prominent artists including Taylor Swift, who donated $250,000, Lady Gaga, Adele, and many others expressed support for Kesha using social media and public statements, using hashtag #FreeKesha, FreeKesha, FreeKesha, FreeKesha.
And I'd also like to take this moment to publicly support Kesha. Thank you very much.
Judge Kornreich dismissed several of Kesha's counterclaims, including the gender-motivated hate crime claim and the sexual assault claim, citing statute of limitation issues, which I will just say that the statute of limitations is the one thing that I always see stop victims from getting justice. Nevertheless, the court also found that Sony couldn't be held liable for Dr. Luke's alleged misconduct because Kesha did not prove Sony had actual knowledge or control over his abuse. Kesha dropped her sexual assault lawsuit in California in an effort to focus all of her attention into the New York litigation and resume her music career. However, the defamation case filed by Dr. Luke in New York remained active and continued through discovery. I know this is a lot, but we're almost done, okay? Kesha's legal team filed new claims alleging that Dr. Luke withheld royalties from her and interfered with her ability to perform and release new music. A month later, a judge ruled that Kesha could not terminate her contract with Kemosabe Records or Sony, reiterating the earlier decision that her agreements are valid and binding. The court also sided with Dr. Luke in denying Kesha's claims that she was denied the opportunity to record and release music. Opportunity. In August, Kesha would release her third studio album, Rainbow, under Kemosabe and RCA. Although Dr. Luke was not involved in the creative process, the release remained contractually bound to his label.
Can I give you a hug?
No, thanks.
Please?
No, thanks.
A little one.
Yeah, no, thanks.
Oh.
The album received critical acclaim and debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200.
I don't know who that was.
Yeah, it's Kesha.
Okay, well, I wish.
During discovery in the ongoing defamation case, text messages from Kesha to Lady Gaga were revealed, in which Kesha allegedly claimed that Dr. Luke also raped Katy Perry. However, Katy Perry later denied this under oath. Dr. Luke's legal team used this as evidence in the defamation case, arguing that Kesha has made knowingly false statements. Quick sidebar, I have nothing against Katy Perry, but she's actually not a great person. Katy Perry has been in multiple court cases with comically old people over their land. In 2015, when Katy Perry tried to buy a convent, a literal convent like with nuns, the Archduchess said, "Sure, we'll sell it to you." But 2 elderly nuns said, "Not so fast, pop star. We already sold it to a
Strong woman.
Katy sued, the nuns sued, the restaurateur got caught in the crossfire, and then during a court hearing, one of the nuns collapsed and literally died in court. Which is not funny, but like, Jesus. Like literally, Jesus Christ, what in the world? Eventually the courts ruled in Katy's favor and she got the convent plus $10 million and damages. The second victim, Carl Westcott, 84, recovering from back surgery, accidentally sold his $15 million mansion to Katy Perry while allegedly high on pain meds. A few days later, he was like, wait, what? You see, Carl Westcott wasn't just an old decrepit man. He was also suffering from extreme delusions because he had Huntington's disease, which is a fatal neurodegenerative disorder that leads to the breakdown of nerve cells in your brain. He shouldn't be able to make decisions without other people, period. But the court sided with Katy and promptly had Carl evicted from his house. And apparently, the courts saw this and decided it was kind of fucked up. So now they're trying to pass a law called the Perry Act, which would give old people 72 hours to back off from such decisions. But aside from Katy Perry destroying old people in court, she got some backlash for still collabing with Dr. Luke after these allegations surfaced. And when asked why she was still collabing with him, she basically avoids the question.
You decided to involve Dr. Luke on this album. Why did you choose to work with him?
Look, I understand that it started a lot of conversations, and he was one of many collaborators that I collaborated with. But the reality is it comes from me. The truth is I wrote these songs from my experience of my whole life going through this metamorphosis. And he was one of the people to help facilitate all that, one of the writers, one of the producers. And I am speaking from my own experience. Like when I speak about Woman's World, I speak about feeling so empowered now as a mother, as a woman, giving birth, creating life, creating another set of organs, a brain, a heart. I created a whole ass heart and I did it and I'm still doing it and I'm still a matriarch and feeling really grounded in that. That's where I'm speaking from.
Yeah.
And so I created all of this with several different collaborators, people that I've collaborated with from the past, from Teenage Dream era, all of that.
I'm just going to be straight with you guys, no homo, saying this is my story. And I created a whole ass heart. I did that. Has nothing to do with you including an alleged abuser on your album. But back to it. February 6, 2020, the New York Supreme Court ruled that Kesha defamed Dr. Luke in her private text to Lady Gaga by accusing her of raping Katy Perry. I just want to state again, this is a claim Katy Perry denied. And so the court ruled that Kesha made a false statement with actual malice and must now pay Dr. Luke's company over $373,000 in interest for late royalty payments. So not looking good for Kesha. And a year after that, June 2021, the New York Court of Appeals agreed to hear Kesha's appeal on whether Dr. Luke qualifies as a public figure. If he is deemed a public figure, the defamation standard would require Dr. Luke to prove Kesha acted with actual malice. This distinction is key to the defamation lawsuit. And 2 years after that, New York's highest court ruled that Dr. Luke is a limited public figure for purposes of the lawsuit. This raised the burden of proof for his defamation case, requiring that he must prove Kesha knowingly made false statements or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. This was a huge win for Kesha. After almost 10 years of claims and appeals, Kesha and Dr. Luke reached a settlement. Both parties issued separate statements. Kesha reiterated that she cannot recount everything that happened, and only God knows what happened that day, which is not very confidence-inducing. While Dr. Luke maintained that he never drugged or assaulted Kesha, and that their legal battle was hard-fought. The terms of their settlement remain confidential. No criminal charges were ever filed against Dr. Luke, and that's as far as we know about this situation. We have no idea how this settlement went, but I'm guessing Dr. Luke got tired of going to court. So let me know how you guys think it went down below. As far as my own personal opinion on this, I think if these allegations are true, from the alleged forced abortion, allegedly violating Kesha's autonomy, then he should really be in jail for a long time. A lot of the accusations are plainly evil. Who the fuck brags about manipulating their partner to that degree, or getting girls drunk so they can take advantage of them at a mass scale? That's not normal or acceptable behavior in the slightest. So if this is true, my god, throw him in jail! But that's all I have to say about that. This has been Actually Evil. Check out my mailing list to never miss another upload, and please consider becoming an ally of evil by hitting that subscribe button down below. And peace.